Howdy there, nerds! So, as you can see, we are currently going to be taking a look at something a little bit more down memory lane because, well, Choose Your Legends does not seem to be coming for a little while. To be generous, I'd say late July, but to be just cautious, it's most likely August like before. So, there's no real surprises there for those who are hoping for anything. However, I do need to point out a lot of you have been asking if you should be saving for Choose Your Legends, and, well, that's mostly one, up to you, but two, also, I figured it'd be fun to take a look at the units as they came out last time and compared them to how they are now, where they have their places in meta. And obviously, when it comes to Choose Your Legends, I'm just gonna say real quick that a lot of them were meta changers during the time, because of not only their abilities, but also because of their weapons and a lot of things that came with it. So naturally, when anyone asks me if you should save for it, I'm just gonna say yes, obviously, but let's go a little bit deeper, let's do this deep dive, and let's take a look. So, I'm just gonna point out before we begin too much with this, Lucina and Roy did not get as much attention as, the first place units, Lynn and Ike, for obvious reasons. They got second. So naturally, they don't have, a unique ability for themselves. They mostly just have, unique weapons, and that might be a bit of a detriment. They're still incredibly strong, but you're going to see that they have a little bit of competition to deal with a few things. Now, Lucina, not Lynn. Lucina technically doesn't really have too much competition. She's actually a very competent physical buffer, as you've seen with Garrus Gogol. With that and drive speed and maybe even a drive attack seal, she's going to be able to buff up physical attackers with +6 attack and speed without really needing to be too close to them. And that's actually a pretty competent thing. I don't think any other real unit has this, kind of sort of debuff. The only thing I can really think of is Marth, with his Falchion Refine, and I guess technically Delthea as well with, Dark Aura, and maybe Lind if you happen to refine it or, metamorphosize her ability there. All in all, she's an incredibly strong Lance unit. I feel she's a bit of a sleeper hit, because technically we haven't really gotten too many incredible Lance units, outside of maybe things like Harden, which are whole things themselves, especially since meta now has shifted from what was previously in this game, which was Blade Tomes and a lot of other nonsense, to things like dragons and armor emblem. So, especially dragons. Good lord, dragons. But Lucina, still a bit of a sleeper hit. Her ability to buff units, especially physical targets, are really amazing, and just something that I feel still very useful to this day. I know a lot of people still actually use her, so nothing too bad. She's still pretty strong, and a very good defensive wall, too. The only thing, of course, is that she does not technically have very many abilities to bring over to others, outside of maybe drive attack, or, drive speed and, Aether, I guess. Now, Roy is unfortunate, because if anything, Roy is just unfortunate because of what he is. As a Cavalier, he also, of course, has the problem with being a Cavalier sword unit, which is just even more of a problem due to the fact that they've added a lot more of those in recent history. Not only that, but recent, characters have been pretty strong as well. Blazing Durandal, though, is really nice. An attack buff, plus, of course, the special charge cooldown, Heavy Blade, essentially, as long as he has more attack, which usually on a horse team he will. The only problem, though, is outside of that, he does not have much that changes this. He's still quite strong, but he has a lot of competition now, more than ever, with characters like Siegbert, who kind of runs the exact same sort of build, same sort of weapon, same sort of, concept in that he's a huge attacker. We also have, Ares, who can trigger specials like crazy, and then Sigurd, who can, just take damage like crazy as well. And, of course, even Exalted Crom, who, if he manages to be below a certain health threshold, he'll get, a pretty big stat increase. So, all in all, Roy's kind of fallen a bit behind, especially with a lot of the newer Sword Cavaliers, unfortunately. He is probably the only one who's really fallen behind. Lucina still has a lot going on for her. Now, let's continue on to the next big portion of that. We're going to be talking about the first place units from the first ever. Yeah, I know you had to show me Gale Force as well. God, I forgot about that. Oh, the trailers of the old times. So, let's talk about the first place
My father was an
units.
incredibly skilled horseman, and a great shot with a bow, too.
Thank you, Lynn. So, the one thing that I really find fun about Lynn is when she was released, this was probably the biggest attempt to at least be anti-meta for a lot of reasons, at least. Up until this point in the game, horse units were pretty big, domineering units. Not only that, but blade tomes were a really big part of the meta as well. So naturally, it makes sense that she would have a weapon like Mulligar at the time, which is basically, hey, you happen to be using fortifies, rallies, and things like this. Up till this point, panic ploys and things like that were still kind of coming into their own little thing, but Mulligar was the direct contribution to trying to at least change the meta. A lot of the first place units in this game are still very much anti whatever meta was going on at the time. However, they're still incredibly strong for a lot of reasons. Brave Lynn, of course, being on a horse, had a lot going on. Not only that, but she had great abilities like Seke's Blessing that obviously stopped distant counter in all shapes and forms, at least when it came to weapons, which were also a big contributing factor to a lot of why Lynn is still so strong to this day. Seke's Blessing, Mulligar, and of course the fact that she's on a horse and can of course get horse buffs, she is still one of the top units, at least when it comes to a lot of things. When it comes to free-to-play, when it comes to PvE, a lot of these units are, of course, incredibly strong, and a lot of people went with her when she was free. So, I think it's a pretty obvious one there. Outside of that, though, nowadays, though, when it comes to the meta, dragon units are quite handily reigning supreme in a lot of ways. As you can see, Seke's Blessing doesn't stop distant counter from, any sort of dragon unit. The only thing that I could really change that would probably be something like Fire Sweep. So naturally, Lynn has a little bit of a disadvantage now. She's going to be going up against, dragon units who are going to be targeting her weakness, which is her defense. So we'll have to see where that goes when it comes to actual units later on, but she is still incredibly strong. And still, you still slap, brave bow on her, and she's gonna do a massive amount of damage. From here, though, let's talk about Ike, who a lot of people...
Thousands of people, and they were all saying my name.
I still can't get over this. That's just... Anyways. See, the one thing that Ike did is that not only did he introduce, himself with a new ability that a lot of people use now more than ever. He's been sacrificed more often than not. Steady Breath was the first introduction to breath skills, and of course brought along with it a lot of the changes to the meta. But not only that, Irvan was also kind of a direct counter-attack to a lot of what people were using at the time, and still are using, because, naturally. That, of course, is brave weapons, and especially brave bows, which technically Ike was trying to, kind of get around, or at least this was the first introduction to the whole, consecutive attacks reduced effect, basically. So, honestly, when it came to him, he's still very much a tank unit. Bjork's Blessing, I really don't feel too much was, that much of a contributor when it came down to it. But Steady Breath and Irvan were one of the bigger portions that really boosted Ike and a lot of the what would eventually become a enemy phase meta a lot more potent, because with it we got Steady Breath, which could be transferred over to other units, which meant faster cooldowns, a lot of other nonsense. So what I'm trying to say here is, when it comes down to choose your legends and if you should be going for them, I'm going to just say that yes, a lot of them you should be saving up for them, because it's obvious as to why. These units became a big part of what eventually became the meta. Not only that, if they weren't actually involved in the meta in some ways outside of, what they are initially, we had things like Steady Breath introduced, which were insane abilities that made a lot more units a lot more capable. So, should you be saving? Yes, you probably should. And I didn't realize that they updated Bjork's Blessing. So that's a really odd one. So the question becomes, should you learn anything here when it comes down to it? Well, should you learn anything? Should you aim to keep any of your orbs and be ready for Choose Your Legends? Probably. Most likely. If you don't have the money to spend on any of the summer banners, I strongly suggest waiting for this, and chances are you'll be able to get a free, unit out of it like last time. In fact, I'm pretty sure they still have the distribution for last year's Brave units going on if you happen to start the game, if I recall correctly. So there's a lot of fun stuff to be had there. And that's just last year's. Imagine what this year's is going to be about. Is it going to be a direct contrast to try and beat dragons back out of meta, or are we going to be getting just some solidly powerful units? It's hard to say, because, well, we have another month or two to go, but it's been a fun one. Don't you think? Outside of that, nerds, thanks for watching, and I will see you all soon. Hopefully this video made some sense. Catch you nerds later. Bye.